So, my name is Andy Rabens, and I work for the US government overseeing our global youth issues portfolio at the US Department of State. And my guess is that some of you either looked through the program or the website or are looking at me right now and wondering, why in the world do we have someone from the US government or government at all talking to us today about entrepreneurship? Is that fair? There's a narrative out there, I think, that government is often a big weight around the legs of entrepreneurs, putting up more red tape, adding extra bureaucracy, and making it more difficult for entrepreneurs to get their innovation and work done. There's a narrative out there that says the government should stay as far away from the entrepreneurship space as possible and let the entrepreneurs innovate in a big way. And there may be some truth to that. But what I'm going to argue for today, over the next handful of minutes, is that government can be a very important and useful partner for good in the entrepreneurship space. And I'm going to start by touching just very briefly on why government actually cares about this and give a few reasons for that. I'm then going to move into a space and talk about a couple of ways that government, and the US government in particular, is really investing in empowering entrepreneurs through different means. And then thirdly, I want to close and make an ask of you all, so I kind of touch on where we can go from here and make an ask of you all for how we can better partner as government, as entrepreneurs, as ecosystem partners to be able to further unlock and unleash entrepreneurs in any parts of the globe. Now, a few key reasons why government actually does care about entrepreneurship in actually empowering young entrepreneurs, but also older entrepreneurs in different spots of the globe. The first one is this idea of the future of work. And many of you are probably familiar with some of the numbers, which we'll get into in a minute. But this idea that the pace of change in today's 21st century innovation-fueled global economy is incredibly fast. And it can be pretty scary when you're thrust into the middle of it. Does anyone remember any of these things on screen? Anyone ever have one of those things on the right, a Motorola Pager growing up? Seems like it could be kind of in a museum somewhere. When I was a senior in high school, back in 2001, I thought I was the hippest kid in school because I had the latest tech. The Motorola Pager was something you would clip on your belt. Someone would call you, you'd look at it, there's a number on there, and then you'd race as quick as you could to a payphone. You'd throw in a quarter or 35 cents when everybody was angry when they raised the price, but you throw in a quarter or 35 cents and call back the number. Hopefully you knew who it was. Sometimes you didn't, and that was the way you engaged. I'd go home to my shared computer with my two brothers and my parents, the brand new iMac desktop computer. I'd get on my MySpace account and be able to try to interact with some people in different parts of the city or the globe. And then I'd maybe shoot a couple emails from my Andy Y2K AOL account. If somebody told me back then that in 2019, we'd have over 3 billion email users, 2 billion smartphone users, that we'd have Facebook and Twitter and Airbnb and Uber. We'd have driverless cars starting to make headway. We'd have drones delivering food. I'd tell him that your head's in the clouds and you've been reading way too many sci-fi movies. And when you think about where we're going in the future, the pace of change can be pretty scary at times. There are some studies out there, there's some numbers that suggests that by 2030, in a mere 11 years from now, up to 40% of jobs globally are going to change or disappear because of robotics and artificial intelligence. Up to 2 billion jobs globally. There's another study out there that says 2 out of 3 young people who are entering into school, to grade school today, 2 out of 3 are going to go into professions that don't even exist yet. So there's a real need to make sure that young people and people as a whole are well equipped to be able to succeed in that 21st century, fast moving, changing environment. That's kind of one reason. Two is this issue of the massive youth demographic. Any folks in this room know the percentage of the world that's below the age of 35 today? Yell it out. Want to guess? 60%. 60% of the world below the age of 35, 4.5 billion people around the globe below the age of 35 today. In Africa, the youngest continent in the world, 1.2 billion people, over 2/3 of that population below the age of 35. And you couple up the fact that many young people are growing up as digital natives with tech at their fingertips, and you have an incredibly powerful demographic that can be a force for incredible good, or can be a potential driver of conflict and instability if not empowered in a meaningful way. And that takes us to a third reason why government really cares. And that's the economic and national security implications of actually getting this right. We talked about the youth numbers moments ago, 4.5 billion young people. We talked about the fast changing environment, the changing jobs, and the need to develop new skill sets to be able to succeed in the 21st century innovation-fueled global economy. And government takes very seriously our efforts to try to empower young people down a more positive pathway as economic drivers in their communities and countries, as partners for peace, and to do everything that we can to ensure they're not sources of economic stability or a drain on the national or international economy, or potentially sources of instability and conflict. So there's a big economic and national security element around entrepreneurship as a whole. And the government sees entrepreneurship as one of the tools in the toolbox to be able to unleash the innovation of young people and people as a whole, to create those new jobs, ideally dignified jobs, industries of the future, and opportunities to connect and empower underserved communities as well in other parts of countries and continents where maybe women, youth, minority communities, or those more prone to be picked off by extremist organizations might exist. So government currently is playing an important role in the entrepreneurship space already. And I'm going to give you two key examples of how we are currently trying to help empower young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs as a whole. But also, we can brainstorm a little bit after about some thoughts for how we can do this much better. Now, the first issue, which is touched on in a couple of earlier presentations, is the importance of our ecosystems. And the fact that at the end of the day, the government does play a role of some sort, and hopefully in a positive fashion, to create an ecosystem for entrepreneurs to succeed. Whether that's creating infrastructure through incubators and accelerators and helping to lift up entrepreneur organizations that are coming in to train and skill young people. Issues around laws and legislation, which was touched on, bankruptcy laws, access to finance, and also the education structures to make sure that education structures as a whole are changing appropriately to better empower and skill young people with what they'll need to be able to succeed in that 21st century innovation-fueled global economy. There's also an important role of government as a convener of entrepreneurs, of investors. They often have large Rolodexes to create programs and initiatives to be able to bring entrepreneurs from different communities and different sectors together. And I think we're doing a decent job of that already. There's a signature youth initiative focused on entrepreneurship that the US runs for Latin America and the Caribbean called YLI, the Young Leaders of the Americas initiative, that brings young entrepreneurs from across the region to the US for about 6 weeks, fans them out in different cities around the country, creates kind of opportunities for them to really dive into the ecosystem, get some skills on training experience as well, build a network with others from around the region, and then to go back home and scale up their businesses in a more global fashion. We have efforts like the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, the 9th of which was held this past June in the Netherlands, in The Hague, Netherlands, in partnership with the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and also partners here in Aruba. There are also a host of other initiatives in different parts of the world. YALI in Africa, YSEALI, Young Southeast Asia Leaders Initiative in Southeast Asia, YTELI in Europe. We've got Tech Women and Tech Girls for young entrepreneurs from the Middle East, North Africa, IVLP, International Visitor Leadership Programs, and a whole host of others. So if you are interested in coming on some sort of exchange or initiative, there's a whole lot out there, and it's worth connecting with your local embassy or consulate to see what opportunities might be available. One of the perks of my job as well is to be able to travel around and meet young entrepreneurs and get to some places that I never thought I'd have the chance to visit and experience firsthand. And whether it's Aruba, Argentina, Belgrade, or Baghdad, where I got to go last November, China or California, there's this movement, I think, of governments, whether it's at the city level, the state level, or the country level, to try to frame their space as innovation hubs. So I think you have an open invite from governments around the globe to try to share ideas and figure out how you can try to punch above your weight and to be able to have a space that really connects other communities as a true innovation hub. Last Thanksgiving, I had the chance to get out to Baghdad and Erbil in Iraq. And even in Baghdad, we visited one of the first co-working spaces called The Station. There's a picture up there from that. And you had young people in Baghdad who had moved back home from being elsewhere as refugees for a while and wanted to reinvest in their community to reshape the economy of the country and to transform the narrative of young people there as innovators and entrepreneurs across the Middle East and in a much larger global context. And I think all of us have heard and have had the chance to experience things in Aruba. We were at the Futura Cafe last night. We've heard much about all the different components of this Immerse Week, the 5 years of ATECH, and it's great to see Aruba punching far, far above its weight and creating its mark as an innovation hub here in the Caribbean, but also as a connective tissue for Latin America and Europe, and also the United States. So I want to close by just hopefully at least making an ask of you all, and hopefully we've had the start of a conversation about seeing the government not just as that big weight from the earlier slide holding entrepreneurs down, but as a real partner that can help to take some of the ideas that you all have, try to reshape some initiatives, create the ecosystems that you want, advocate for the ecosystems with other host governments if your host government is not creating that ecosystem that's helpful for you, and to find new ways to partner going forward. And that really relies, for the last ask, on understanding from you all, the entrepreneurs on the ground, the young leaders from across the Caribbean, across Latin America, across the globe, to really tell us what's needed, what are the ecosystem fixes we can make, what are the type of exchange programs, initiatives that you all want, and how we can partner together and figure out how to put those pieces of the puzzle together. So thank you very much. We've got a couple minutes if you guys want to follow up with any questions, and then I think we have a panel coming up right after that.